Hello witches, and welcome back to A Coven of Two, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they. And in today's video, we're gonna have a chat with Aster Perpetua, who, if you don't know, is an amazing content creator here on YouTube that does witchy content as well. But before we get started, let me quickly remind you that I have opened a Ko-fi where you can support what I do here and also get a tarot reading with me Italian style. So if you would like to support me, you can head on to Ko-fi. And if you decide to do so, thank you so much. If you don't know Aster, she's an amazing content creator here on YouTube, but that makes witchy content as well. But most importantly, she's the entire reason why my channel exists. If you head over to her channel, you will also find a chat that I had with her about activism, Italian folk magic, a lot of juicy bits, so I would go and watch our video together on her channel as well. And now on to our chat with Aster here. I don't have cats jumping around, which is a good advancement. They might come at some point, but until that happens, we're good.
Don't worry. I know how they are.
Hello, Aster. It's such a pleasure to finally be chatting with you. How are you today?
Thank you for having me.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. Like people might, I say it very loudly, but if people don't know, the entire point is that my channel would not exist had I not found your channel and your videos. So the simple fact that that's the origin story of my channel makes me really, really grateful that you're here now. Thank you for making time.
That is super flattering. First of all.
No, honestly, like it was such a serendipitous discovery. Like I've been following you for a few months, and then the amazing timing. We'll get there because I'll ask you about that. The amazing timing with which you made some things.
Oh, girl, it is a pleasure for me to be here. We have been talking a little bit here and there, so I am very happy to be here doing this collaboration. This is the first time ever I'm doing a collab. I've never done it before, so I am very happy.
Thank you so much for being here for the first time. Of course, if who wouldn't know you, but if anybody doesn't know you, of course, they'll find all your links for all social media and your YouTube channel down in the description below. So to get started, just so we know what's the foundation, the cornerstone of the thing, how were you raised spiritually and what is your current vision of spirituality?
So I will take a minute just to introduce myself because I'm guessing that many people who watch you probably don't know me. So my name is Aster. I am a Brazilian, born and raised Brazilian folk practitioner. And I have been on the internet since 2022. I have started on TikTok, but eventually I moved over to YouTube. That's where I post my content nowadays. I feel it's so much better. And like Isha said, my links, if you're curious to take a look at like, what? Brazilian folk magic, what's that? I am curious. My links will be in the description, so feel free to pay a visit. And the question, how was I raised spiritually? There was never a structure, let's say a spiritual structure, but there has always been a very strong influence from my mother's family heritage, because my mother's family was part of Umbanda for many years. And Umbanda, for those of you who don't know, Umbanda is a Brazilian religion that evolved from African practices, African beliefs. All of that thanks to slavery. It's an unfortunate and also fortunate heritage, because at least we got to keep some parts of the culture that came with them within Brazilian culture. And like my grandma, she used to be a medium at an Umbanda temple, also one of my aunts. My uncles, they played the instruments that they use at the rituals. But over time, they all became Protestants before they passed away. So they were Protestants by the end of their lives. And my mother, she was the only person who remained superstitious, as she calls it. you know. And I also have an aunt who is still alive, but she's a super Protestant, church kind of woman. She's very chill, but she's not spiritual in the same way that my mother is. And growing up, my mother would take me to Umbanda temples to watch the rituals, to watch the entities manifesting through the medium. So I grew up looking at all of that. And yeah, the only thing that I would say that is different for me now is that like people who go to Umbanda temples, they become very dependent on the temples and the mediums most of the time. And now that I am in another country, because there's also that layer, it's not like I have temples available for me everywhere. I got to put my own hands on it and do things for myself.
So a bit more empowering in that sense, like there was the need for ingenuity, I guess, to like, yes, if there's nothing here, I need to make my own. It's funny because after your video on Umbanda, I actually looked up, do we have temples around? And accidentally, the closest one, it's London. So it's a good like 2.5 hours away. But it was really fascinating.
I understand.
I'll link that video as well, because it was something that I had no perception of. And it's a really nice way to integrate and empower people in a way. But I can imagine that when you have that in your codified rituals and religion, you might become dependent on those who become the means, or quite literally the medium between you and spirituality. Because of how popular I seem to understand Umbanda is still in Brazil, and accidentally the part that my wife was really interested by is Spiritism, which I seem to understand there are interlace of overlap between Umbanda and Spiritism. What would you say is the overlap there? What do you know about Spiritism? How do you think that it relates to Umbanda from your experience?
There is a whole tangent right there. So to understand Spiritism, we need to go a little bit back in history and look at Brazilian history. So Brazil, there are people out there who don't know, and there's no shame in it, because you know, if somebody is on the other side of the world, of course, they don't know about Brazilian history. So Brazil has been colonized by Portugal. And during a long time being a colony, the Brazilian culture was very influenced by everything that came from Portugal. But then it was like the independence happened. It was a process between 1822 to 1824. And after Brazil became an independent, not a republic, but independent from Portugal, instead of embracing the Brazilian roots, and we have indigenous people, we have Black people, this is the Brazilian heritage, this is who we are. No, especially the elites, they didn't want to embrace that. They didn't want to become indigenous. They didn't want to become Black. So when independence came about, they looked for other cultural influences. And that, for some reason, that happened to be France. I think that at the time, France was really influential still, and the elites spoke French and everything. So that's how Spiritism came into Brazil, because the rich people could get French books and could read them.
That was the most interesting part to me, like discovering that Spiritism is relatively big in Brazil, but actually originated in France. And now actually you're living in France while you are from Brazil. So that was also one of the points. Like, do you see any connections there? I have no idea. But
yeah, after I started taking a closer look into all of that, I asked myself if that wasn't really that much of a coincidence that I came here. There's maybe a part of, I don't know, something unconscious, something that I've learned from observing the society around me, that there was something special in France. And then I wanted to come here and learn the language and whatever. So I think it was not by chance that I ended up coming here, as I thought, it's just a free choice. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't. But yeah, Allan Kardec was the person that wrote, I think he wrote around 5 books about Spiritism. And I have 2 of them here.
Oh, wow.
I have the Book of Mediums.
Yes.
And the Book of Spirits.
Yes.
The Book of Spirits was the first one that he wrote. It's a very interesting one because he interviewed, let's say, spirits. It was beyond a divination thing. It was more like, let's understand what actually happens after death. Let's ask the spirits. So there are all kinds of questions in the book. It is really very interesting and makes us think about existence, about morals, about so many things. I really recommend that book, both of them actually. So, going back to the 19th century, Brazilian elites got to get those books in French, as they are here, read them, and like the intellectuals of the time would debate about the contents of the books, and then they would start holding seances and that kind of thing. Allan Kardec, he started this pursuit because he wanted to make a link between spirituality and science. He wanted to kind of prove something scientifically. And there's a movie, by the way, on Netflix that I really recommend. It's super interesting, called Kardec with K.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. It's just a surname. Fair enough. Nice. I didn't know. Thank you.
Yeah, take a look, because this movie really portrays his life and all the consequences that he suffered for being a person who would take spirituality seriously in his time. Because back in his time, somebody who was speaking to spirits, they would be sent to a mental institution.
An asylum, yeah.
You know? And he's really suffered the consequences of touching on that subject and trying to understand it, you know. But then in Brazil, those intellectuals and the elites started studying his works, and they started having their own seances. And that was the type of spirituality, like dealing directly with spirits, that was socially acceptable. Everything that was indigenous or black was illegal even. It could not be held. People could not keep their beliefs, but the elites could have that whitewashed spirituality.
I was literally thinking the same words.
And it was okay, to have a seance and talk to a spirit, because within the Kardecist format, it was spirits of the highest order. It was not spirits of the people. And that's where there's a little overlap between Umbanda and Spiritism. Because in Umbanda, we find spirits of the people. The black people, indigenous people, prostitutes, everybody who was marginalized, they manifest through Umbanda. And then those spirits started manifesting in Kardecist seances, you see, and they were not welcome because they were not higher order spirits.
What did they think it would have been a higher order spirit, if not the spirit of a person that died? Because that was what Kardec started off with. Like, these were all incarnate people.
Yeah, I really don't know what were the requirements, but if a spirit showed up there saying, "Hey, I am an indigenous man and I have a message for y'all," no, you don't. They were simply not accepted. They were not welcome. And then at a certain point, there was this indigenous spirit who came down to a seance and talked exactly about that. If I'm not mistaken, Caboclo Sete. Caboclo means indigenous person. But this spirit was very important for the foundation of Umbanda, because he came to a Kardecist seance and he gave a speech about those types of spirits not being welcome at the Kardecist Center, you know.
For white people to piss off a spirit so much that he needs to come along and give a speech about that. As if we didn't have trouble enough. Yeah, like, you know what? Just to make sure, let's start a potential war between the incarnate people right now and the spirits we are pissing off.
Yeah, so the name of the spirit in Portuguese was Caboclo das Sete Encruzilhadas, which means Caboclo, indigenous person, of the seven crossroads. So this spirit incorporated a medium of the center. The medium was called Zélio Fernandino de Moraes. And through that manifestation, Umbanda was formed, let's say.
Oh, wow.
Because then they decided to have their own space where any spirit would be welcome.
So they are relatively young traditions then, like 200 years old or something like that. There's always the perception, I guess, in the esoteric occult world that these traditions are centuries, if not millennia old. And I'm sure they are in different forms, but both Umbanda and Spiritism then are of the 19th century, that I seem to understand. Do they still share any level? Like, has Spiritism come down in the high vision that it has of itself? Or they're still two very separate things in Brazil?
They are still separate institutions because to this day, Kardecist Spiritism is still a whitewashed form of spirit communication that is better accepted by society. To this day, Umbanda still suffers a lot of prejudice, a lot of persecution even. And there are many people who say, oh, if I wouldn't be Christian, I would probably be Kardecist. Because there's a lot of also not only whitewashing, but also Christian values that influence Kardecism. So it's more accepted by people in general.
It's just mind-boggling to me that even in some, like, we manage to carry on colonialism and racism, basically, even in things that don't have to do with bodies, with people. Like, we managed to carry on the elitism there. It's and I guess in that sense, I'm not surprised that I found more books in English about Spiritism than Umbanda. And that suddenly explains to me what my wife had heard of Spiritism, but not of Umbanda. And
well, because the people who practice Umbanda and live Umbanda, due to structural racism and everything, they don't get to have this level of English to tell the world about what they believe in. So that's why people from other countries have no idea that Umbanda exists. I have never seen anybody, any Brazilian person, talking about Umbanda in English. I've never seen it. I have seen like Americans trying to talk about certain entities that belong to Umbanda, which, by the way, was very upsetting because they said a lot of misinformation. But a Brazilian person representing the culture, I've never seen it before. So I kind of took it as a mission for myself, because we don't need other people to tell our stories and to tell it wrong, which is worse.
No, I think it's one of the most powerful things about your channels and the thing that you talk about. It's not that we need reminding that representation matters, but it's also sometimes it matters and it exposes you, because, you know, do you always need to have the energy and the spoons to educate people? And, you know, as people of color, as a queer person myself, I'm always like, do I have to wear that hat today? Like, do I have to actually educate people? But then at the end of the stick is, well, if I don't,
nobody will.
Straight people will do it themselves and misinterpret.
Yeah, and then the narrative will continue the same. So we have to wear that hat. It's a mission, you know.
That's that's part of that emotional labor that we're subject to, and it might be that you embrace it, and I respect you incredibly for that. But I can only imagine the level of frustration that it also brings when people just decide, oh, I'll read a book or two about this, and I'll be able to talk about it, even if I've never been part of the culture or understanding.
My God, how is that possible? My goodness, like, for example, you are Italian, right? And if I think about your background, I could never come to the internet and be like, let me teach you about Italian magic and witchcraft. My God, I've never been to Italy. How dare people? They have never set foot in Brazil and they want to talk about my culture. How is that possible? It's it's so absurd.
It's white exceptionalism, but you have. I'm considering like skipping or jumping questions at least, because that was a very good point, and I was gonna come to that, and it's the reason why, again, I even considered opening my channel. Like, I've been practicing for the last 18 months now, almost 2 years, and I'm relatively familiar with YouTube, but I wasn't thinking at all about sharing my experience until I saw your video, which is why are all or most witches white. And boy, oh boy, if that was like, Aster has a point, the representation matter. So in light of that wonderful video, what do you think that the witchcraft community can do, in your eyes, to move past their unconscious biases and towards active anti-racist action? Because there's a lot of acquiring and not considering and white centrism, because, as you explained in that video, there is a part of witchcraft that is originated in Europe, but then, as a colonialist mindset does, there's been spreading. So do you think that the witchcraft community in general, but I guess specifically here, the WitchTube community, can do to move beyond their unconscious biases and do something actively anti-racist?
I think that there are different roles when it comes to that. There's the role of the creators and the roles of the audience. And when it comes to the creators, first of all, as people who come from minorities, we need to step up and wear those hats. I mean, now I have a full-time job. I am tired all the time, so I know the struggle. I know the effort, Sometimes, I wake up at 5 a.m. to get the train and be punctual, arrive punctually at work, and I then work for X amount of hours. And when I come back, I am tired. And sometimes I need to get energy from I don't know where, put some lipstick on, and talk to the camera. There's a very high level of effort involved. And I know the struggle very well, but we need to occupy those spaces. If you are a Black person, LGBT, any kind of minority, you have to step out of the shadows and occupy spaces. To make your voice be heard, you need to start speaking. You need to speak up. So that's one thing. Another thing for other creators who are already out there, who are already known, is for them to give space for other voices to be heard. Because then you're only gonna have other white girls coming to your channel to talk about their practice. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody has something to share and to teach. Everybody has a unique path, but there are so many different voices that deserve to be heard. And once I've seen this quote somewhere on the internet that talked about books. If you only read what everybody else is reading, you will only think what everybody else is thinking. And we can make kind of an association with this topic, because if you're only listening to the same voices, you will only be thinking the same thing. You will never learn new perspectives, learn things you didn't know before, you had no idea. So I would say that the biggest creators should give space to voices that haven't been heard before. And the audience, there's also the role of the audience of being curious and being open-minded about different perspectives, people that, that don't look like everybody else, just another girl with straight hair talking about how she burns rosemary or whatever. Look at different things. Look for people who look different, because in the inside, they will have something different to say. Most definitely. So yeah, that's how I think the community could break a little bit of this racist system that exists.
It's I couldn't have put it better myself, to be honest. YouTube notoriously already has an algorithm issue about showing a certain kind of face coming up in the thumbnails. So yeah, the minimum effort that creators and the audience should do is indeed push
I don't think it's really the algorithm. I think that being in a racist society, it is very challenging for us to make engaging content that will make people interested. If I'm not sure if that makes sense, but as somebody who doesn't look with like the standard beauty standard kind of thing, it is a little bit more challenging to put ourselves out there and make people interested.
Yeah, you have short attention span. What kind of familiar face are you gonna go for to listen?
Yeah, because people, even if it's not intentional, but people have a racist conditioning, you see, so it's not everything on the algorithm. It has also to do with conditioning.
It's absolutely the case. I think that's the reason why YouTube has tried. There's a few programs that they run, like they specifically for Black creators, because they realize that you're very right, whether it's the algorithm or the habit of people, there is a deficit here. So along with taking up space, there's also the other side of, well, you need to go past as a member of the audience to your prejudice and habit. Let's just call it a habit. Let's just say that the world has made you used to listen to people that look a certain way and push the boundaries. Wouldn't that be nice? In that mindset, knowing that there's a certain intrinsic habit in the audience and in the audience of YouTube and social media in general, what do you think inspired you to share your spiritual experience and journey with an audience, knowing that possibly there was that prejudice that made things harder for you?
Well, what inspired me, first of all, was when I started getting witchcraft books, I became interested and I started getting books. I saw that, wait a minute, I know this. My mother taught me this. What's going on? I realized that we were kind of witchy. And I thought with myself, you know what? I do have something to say about all of this. I, as a consumer of this type of content, felt that all narratives were very similar. All the creators were very similar, with no shade. I really like many of them. It's not about that, but everything was very one note, let's say. And I believe that representation matters. And if nobody else was doing that, I decided that I would do it myself. And there is one Brazilian artist that really inspires me a lot. It has nothing to do with spirituality whatsoever. But it's a singer called Anitta. Look for her afterwards. She comes from the suburbs of Rio City. And nowadays she's world famous. It's very pop. I'm not sure if you're into that. So many people don't know her, but she's very famous nowadays. She made a song with Madonna even.
Oh, wow.
So you see, and she started making her music in English. And that's where her career started going places that no other artist in Brazilian history has ever done before. She is really a big inspiration for me. And that's why I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it in English, because I think that Brazilian people already know enough. There are so many creators talking about the things that I talk about. Brazilians don't need another voice that talks within the culture. I think we need to talk to the outside, to reach other people and show our culture, because Brazil is not one big favela, you know, there's so much to my culture and my country. And it's just such an honor to you know, to be able to do this. It's really a pleasure. And yeah.
It's marvelous. Like I know in Italy we have a lot of challenges with language as well. It's very, very uncommon for someone that comes from Italian to be able or care, to be honest, about learning English. Like Spanish is closer, so we have the tendency there. And on the other side of the coin, it's very hard then to get information out of Italy, in good and bad. And I think personally, I have this vision of Italy that there's a lot of bad stuff that goes there and rots because there's not the perception from the outside, so there's no pressure from the outside to change. So I feel that, and kudos to you, because you come from a country whose main language is Portuguese. You live in France, and my English wasn't that amazing. Not even now, but if I wasn't immersed constantly in it, I am in true awe. Like if you hadn't told me, you would have been American to me.
Thank you. I used to be a teacher, actually, English teacher.
There we go. Because I was like, that is to a level of impeccable that, wow. Honestly, like, I don't think that the first couple of videos of yours that I saw, Brazil side were necessarily mentioned, and I was absolutely sure 100% that you were American. Mind, I am not great with accents. Like, I'm still learning that. I've been in English-speaking country for the last 20 years now, and I still cannot tell accents apart. But when I heard it, it was like, no, this is just like perfect and smooth and impeccable. And I was like, oh no, actually, she's Brazilian. No, it's so just to wrap it up then, because it's really interesting to hear your take and your intention. So from the other side, from the side of the audience, what is one advice that you would give them if they want to get into witchcraft, and if they are at the beginning, or if they're looking to take the next step? And I don't know, there may be someone like me, like they've been like practicing and dipping their toes. So what would be a starting point that you advise, and what would be then a development point that you would give them? And it can be a suggestion, it can be a book.
I would suggest for the absolute beginner to read a lot and to start from the beginning. Because at the beginning, we are super curious. We want to learn everything at once. And then what happens is that we don't learn anything. So I have a video on my channel, 7 books for the beginner. So those are books that I recommend you get first and start from there. I also recommend Ancestral Connection. Those are the best spirits you can reach out to. They are right there for you. Just, they're just waiting. They are not in a hurry, so they're just waiting for you. And when you feel ready, they will be ready for you as well. They are the best ones to start with. And I think it is a great experience of like self-discovery and family discovery to dive into the history of your family and talk to the oldest people of your family, get to know the little stories, Did you know that your great grandma did this? Oh yeah, girl, she did. It is super interesting to see what those people who came before us did when they were alive and how patterns repeat. So that's a very good opportunity for healing, for you to do something different. And if there's someone wanting to take their practice to the next stage, to take a next step, I would suggest doing something you are hesitant about, something you are afraid of. Just go ahead and do it. Because once you do it, you will realize it's not a big deal. Like, I struggled a lot to start spirit work because I was afraid. I was afraid of spirits. It was a struggle for me. But then I decided to just jump right in and do it. Like, lock myself in a dark room and, just do it. And then I realized, oh, so that's what happens. It's not a big deal once you do it and you see that there's no apparition that is going to come and whisper in your ear or whatever. You feel confident and comfortable about developing. So if there's something you're hesitant about or afraid, just go ahead and do it. and that's gonna set you free.
That is great advice. There is a lot of conflicting feeling that I myself even have for the next step. So yeah, I just need to sit down and have a talk with myself really, and just go like, okay, these we need to just push through. That's fair. That's very good advice. Aster, thank you so much for making time and joining me here. It's incredibly valuable.
My pleasure.
And it's so valuable to have your take. Not only because, like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know. You're very right. I wouldn't have never known about Brazilian folk magic and what the historical impact of it has, because it's not necessarily something that in Western wine-dominated culture we would hear about. So thank you so very much for your work. And let me just say, if there's one thing that I absolutely adore about your work, beyond what you talk about, is the neatness and tidiness with which you give details. Like, I don't know if you're still doing it, but the fact that it comes, like, a lot of your videos used to come with like the mini PDF guides, the thought and the ability that you have to condense down information and make it easily accessible to people. It's incredibly thoughtful. It's incredibly thoughtful on matters of accessibility as well. So thank you truly so much for the work that you do for the community. And if any of you, for whatever reason, didn't know about Aster, do please click right now and go. I keep you in the background on my TV during the day when I run chores. Like, Aster, you're the friend that I keep there, that I like to have around and like to hear from and learn new things from. So thank you truly so much. And I hope that your channel gets all the attention and views that it deserves, because it deserves so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, to be here and to talk. I am a Gemini, so I love to talk. It's never enough. And I'm really very happy for your comments. Thank you so much, because it really feels good to, see that I'm doing something right, if you know what I mean, that I am really reaching people. This is really, I can't put into words, because that's the goal,
You truly are making such a difference. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Well, wasn't that amazing? And until next time, I hope that we can hex the patriarchy together, because there's need for it. You know the picture, the meme with the Hydra and the 3 heads and the third head?
You always are.
Today more.